Alright everybody, it's Burt from Soft Studios and I'm here with a film review, and today it is for Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw. So, Hobbs and Shaw is the 9th film in the Fast and Furious franchise, but it is the first film that's a spin-off from the main franchise itself, focusing on the main characters of Hobbs and Shaw, who, from my understanding, are Shaw is definitely a more late addition, starting as a villain. Hobbs' character, I think, first appeared in Fast 5. And this is me going off what I think, because I've only really seen 2 of the films in full, which is Fast and Furious, which was the 4th one, I believe, and Fate of the Furious, which was the last main film before this one. I've seen parts of several others, but I haven't actually seen the whole film. Part of the thing is, I don't have a lot of interest in cars and car racing and things like that, so the franchise, as I understood it, never had much appeal for me until I discovered that it had shifted its focus to more heist, spy, and action type stuff. Understandably, there are those who did like the franchise the way it started, and so don't like the shift that it has taken. So, if you're one of those people, right now I'm going to say that this movie is unlikely to do much to please you. It's very much what it has been for the last couple of main films. It's mostly an action film. There's not a race in sight. There's like a couple of car-related chase sequences, but they're not much, and they don't necessarily play on cars as such, more than they are action set pieces that you would expect in a large spy film. So, this was a really strange film for me to watch in a few ways, though I will straight up say right now, I really enjoyed myself watching this movie. Like, the characters are charismatic, the action pieces are exciting, the comedy is funny. Like, the only thing I would have wish it had done more was lean a bit more into the spy thriller tones it sort of had going, and do maybe a bit more of a suspenseful mystery in there somewhere. But it works totally fine without any of that. And the more I thought about it afterwards, perhaps this film would have been too bloated if it had tried to do those things. So instead, it went for the more pure action film it is, and it works well in doing that. This isn't a movie that tried to do too much and failed. It knew exactly what it was aiming for and did that well. And that's something that is good to see. It's good to see something that doesn't think it has to be more than what it is. I did appreciate that it's a film that both knows what it is and who its audience is. This is something that becomes a problem so many times. My big go-to when explaining what that means of when a film knows what it is the Ang Lee Hulk film from 2002, I want to say. I can't remember exactly when it came out. Basically, that film, it's a superhero action film that thought it was a more cerebral type of film. And that could work. You could do a very cerebral type of film with the Hulk. The Hulk comic series at the moment, Immortal Hulk, is a very more almost cerebral horror type take, and it works. The problem was, you had a film with Hulk, Ang Lee's Hulk, was that it was trying to do both things, but it couldn't focus. It wasn't sure exactly what kind of film it was, perhaps because Ang Lee had one idea and executives had another. There was definitely something going on there where it didn't know what sort of a film it wanted to be, and it couldn't find the right way to integrate all those elements, so it just feels very odd to watch. This film, it's very obvious that it knew what it was, especially when it comes to the periodic info dumps that come up to explain why things are happening the way they're happening and all of that. Basically because they either push them through really, really quickly, where they start doing an info dump, and I sat there a couple times like, oh crap, now we're going to have to go for exposition, and then they cut it off really easily. They were like, boom, here it is, let's get moving. And I was like, oh, okay. Or one thing they did that was clever was several times they did that as part of the action set pieces themselves. So you were taking in information, but still watching action happening. So it wasn't like this really jarring moment of like, oh, we're going to sit here and listen to people talking in a film that you came to see action. So it was very clever in doing that, and it knew it had to do that. It's very similar to the way Into the Spider-Verse works. Part of what Into the Spider-Verse is good at being animation was it was able to find a way to make characters talking interesting by using that animation to let them do stuff. They're walking up walls and they're swinging and all that sort of stuff that live action has a bit more trouble with. They managed to find that here in a live action film, and it was really good to see. Strangely though, Hobbs and Shaw favours on having all of the quieter, slower moments towards the climax of the film, giving it a little bit of breathing room right before the final extended action sequence that runs pretty much until the credits, if not until the credits, as far as I can remember. It does make sense. It's a little weird, but it does make sense given the nature of how that third act is structured. It does still feel a bit out of place, even given all that, given how frantic and stylized the film has been up until that point. But it does make a lot of sense given where the characters are at that point in the film and where the sort of the plot is as well. So it's a strange thing when it comes up to it, but you sit there and you go, okay, I understand why we're getting a bit of breathing room, because we are about to head into the final big act, like action sequence. So it makes a lot of sense that they gave you a moment to kind of relax and then jump into it. Kind of the calm before the storm almost. The film is filled with a bunch of very strange editing choices that I don't know if most people are necessarily going to get thrown off by. For me, there was something that became really glaring and kept pulling me out of the film. It was just stuff like, there was like fades. There would be like a fade that would then just cut into like characters talking and stuff like that. It was very odd. Or I'm trying to remember the sequence itself, but it was like the characters come out, I think they were talking, it was part of dialogue, and it would come to these like wide overhead camera shots and like moving, and it would just like cut from one doing this to one over here to one over here, and it would like repeat basically the same shot at a different place. And it had this very odd sort of feel about it. I don't think those were deliberate mistakes. Like I don't think they deliberately went like, oh, we absolutely want to keep cutting to this camera doing this or whatever. I think what happened there, from not knowing any of the process, but just from what I can gather from watching the rest of the film and everything, I think what happened was they had to work with what they had at that point when they got up to editing, because they didn't really have time to fix it, essentially. Because, like, from what I can tell, a lot of it could have been fixed with some reshoots, but it seems like they probably didn't have time or access to the people they needed. Like, a lot of these shots involve people like The Rock, who's probably busy on other stuff, so they couldn't get those reshoots done to make those bits flow. So they went with the editing that would work, and it does the job fine enough. I don't think it's necessarily going to throw people out. I don't think most audience members are going to sit and go like, oh, why are we looking at like these shots in this particular sequence? It might be a little jarring, which is an issue, but I don't think it's going to completely ruin the film for people. So I think that's why they were okay with it. This isn't just a film about action and violence, though, and follows the franchise's, from what I understand, thematic focus on concepts of family and unity. Well, it does throw in its own ideas about technology eliminating our humanity, which I don't think it does a particularly good job of discussing. It sort of throws it in a few times, but it does have a sort of standpoint there. But it's mostly the family and unity stuff that is forefront. It isn't subtle in its themes, and this would probably be a concern in other films. It actually works here, because I think subtlety would bog down the film too much. Like, you came for action, you don't want it sort of espousing these values at you the whole, like, well, not espousing because it kind of does that. I mean, sort of trying to make you think about what the characters are talking about. It doesn't want you to do that, because otherwise you might leave and go like, oh, I didn't realize that's what it was trying to say. But there was this weird dialogue there that I didn't understand why they said that. So it makes it very obvious. Both main characters, essentially. A little bit of a spoiler here. It's not too bad. I don't think anyone's really coming here for, like, gonna see this movie for specifically this sequence of plot. But basically, both main characters start the film in a conversation with a family member about the rest of their family in some manner. And then it ends with them bringing their families back together. And it also involves them learning, like Hobbs and Shaw, learning the value of working together in some way along the way of the film. So it definitely, like, it just goes for those ideas. In a film that involves characters fighting down the side of a building and having smokestacks dropped on them, it totally fits that it's this overt. It doesn't try to hide it like it would have absolutely felt out of place if it was trying to hide, like, oh, we're talking about family, but not really. If you look for it, you can find the subtext. It makes sense that it's very obvious text. And I think it makes it a really, like, a good film to watch in that sense, because I think it has very good values it's trying to talk about. It doesn't necessarily have any bad ideas. I don't necessarily agree with the fact that it takes a very overt stance against technology, even though I don't think it means to. I think it's meant to take an overt stance against transhumanism and the idea that we must change ourselves. But it comes off very much more like, oh, technology is actually a bad path, even though the characters constantly use technology. So I think there's a little bit of a confused conversation in there, but it still totally works in the film, and I don't think most people are going to think that far into it. They're going to relate the conversation about technology to the bad guys of the film. And this film, I will say, does set up future films for this spin-off very heavily. I haven't heard anything about them necessarily doing that, but I assume that is their plan. So it'll be interesting to see where they go there, because from what I understand, there's only 2 films left in the main franchise. So I'll be interested to see what their plan is there. But it does lead into, oh, there's more films. So it's not really a tight one and done kind of film necessarily, but it does cover a lot of the plot points pretty well. Hobbs and Shaw is not a film that you should think about for even a moment too long. Because the moment you do, the illusion is going to start to fade and fall apart on you. The first third to about a half of the film is full of, like, groups like criminals and law enforcement being really terrible at what they do and having no awareness of their surroundings. There's literally a sequence where the bad guys are doing stuff. The cops sneak up on them in plain sight. Like, one dude just had to turn around and go, like, oh, cops. And the whole thing would have been, like, had to kick off earlier. But then the cops get up in there, and then more bad guys show up and sneak up on them in the exact same manner, where they're not being secretive. They just walk on up. One cop should have been at least scanning the area. And that happens again. Like, there's constantly people not paying attention to their surroundings, even though they really should be. There's no reason they shouldn't notice something off the corner of their eye. But you're not really meant to pay too much attention to that kind of stuff. And, I mean, the other thing is that at times in this film, there doesn't seem to be a lot of difference between the more enhanced villain of the piece, in Idris Elba's character, who's part machine and better than human and can survive all this stuff, and then the regular characters, though, Hobbs and Shaw. They seem to really survive a lot of the stuff that is supposed to be the stuff only he can kind of do. Like, there is a superhuman element to them, which, if you think about too long, starts to throw away a lot of what the film's trying to talk about and go for. But you're not meant to pay that much attention to it, essentially. If you can just let yourself be dragged along for the ride, this is a really fun time if you're into action films. If you're totally, like, into what the Fast and the Furious franchise has done recently, you'll probably enjoy this just as much as those main films. So basically, like, just don't expect anything deeper. I'm giving Hobbs and Shaw, or Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw, 3.5 stars out of 5. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Let me know what your thoughts of Hobbs and Shaw, if you've seen it, are in the comments below. I'll be interested to see how it goes. This film, I really enjoyed it. It's not necessarily the most well-made film, which is why the star rating is a little low. It's not, like, bad at all. It's very, like, okay. I just didn't feel like it deserved to be a little higher, because there are some issues, as I pointed out, with the editing and things like that. but it is absolutely a fun film. So yeah, let me know your thoughts below. If you like this video, this review, hit the like button. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button. And if you're new to the channel, you like reviews, you like reactions. I've got a bunch of reactions I'm trying to catch up on a little bit. A few dropped in the last couple of days where I've been like busy-ish, haven't had a lot of time. But yeah, there's a lot of reactions still coming, and there's always new things dropping to be reacted to. So if you like all that kind of stuff and gameplays, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you want to know when it comes out, you can hit the bell, because that's what it's there for, apparently. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next video.
Combat medals, citations, only man to shoot down 3 enemy planes in the last 40 years.
That's kind of a realistic take. Normally,
promotion, you won't retire.
Normally they do some big
efforts, you refuse to die.
500 planes shut down.